Okay, now this is the demonstration of the use of the tool. What I'm going to do now is click here, and that should open up the file. And I usually prefer to work with a PDF, and if there is supplementary information, we can always come back. Actually, there is some supplementary information, and those are supplementary videos. So I'm not interested in that, but uh, this one has some supplementary information. So I'll actually download that and open that as well. This one has some supplementary information. I will have that, and then they also have a data availability statement. Um, all data used to support the findings of this work are included within the article and the supplementary information file. So essentially, if we don't find the data that we are looking for example, individual participant data, then that would mean that we don't have that information. So they are not saying that they will provide the data, individual participant data, if necessary. Okay, so we can look at the supplementary files. This is why we need to look at the supplementary files too all the time. Let's have a look at the PDF first, then we can when we reach the specific question, then we'll actually um, look into the supplementary file. Okay, so I mean, you can download it directly. I use Copper Neo as well, so even if you don't use Copper Neo, that will not be downloaded, so that's not an issue. So now I have this PDF file, and it's opened using Adobe. um, so that is the information that I have. Okay, so now let's go to the RA tool. Study name, this can be anything that you actually want. So here, I usually tend to follow the last name of the first author followed by the year of publication. And I mean, you can use whichever way you want to do, as long as you indicate the correct article. And then the year of publication is actually probably 2018, but let's just make sure that's the case. Okay, let's just go here. Yes, it's 2018. Yeah, study reference. I would download the reference from here, citation, and I would just copy anyone. Anyone. I'm just going to copy the first one. Okay. Look at where I am entering it. I am double clicking it and entering it. You can also paste it, but if you paste it directly from here, then it would it might behave slightly differently. So I generally double click and insert information if I don't want any change in format. Now that is overall clinical relevance that would be completed once all the classifications, domain classifications, either here or here, is completed. Um, okay. So now we go to this domain one, clinical translatability, and the purpose is whether I mean that's in a different lecture, so I'm not going to go through all the details here. It's just a quick demonstration of how to extract information from the uh, papers, how to use this file. Okay, so I will leave this empty because I have not decided to manually override. If I had to manually override, I have to complete that as to why I manually overrode the uh, questions. Okay, so domain one is, did the authors use I mean, signaling question one, domain one, signaling question one. Did the authors use a model that adequately represents the human disease? Now, classify yes or probably yes if the researchers reporting the study described information on the characteristics, different methods of disease induction, and biological plausibility, and provided evidence for choice of the animal model. So they have to provide me evidence for the choice of the animal model. So let me just look at where this information is, and I am going to um, look at the section in the methods. Usually in the section in the methods, okay, I have already noted they have only used male Swiss mice, and between 18 and 20 grams. So they are very specific about that. And okay, I make some notes. Animal Welfare Committee, okay, they have got some ethics approval, um, and they look at the weight of animals measured on days 1, 7, and 10, and the mice were given daily dose of omega 9 or palmitic acid for 14 days before CLP. CLP, what's CLP? I think must be cecal puncture, cecal ligation and puncture. That's coming out there. Um, so that's okay. So first they gave a daily dose of omega 9 or palmitic acid for 14 days before they did the cecal ligation and puncture. Um, and they prepared, okay, they describe how they prepared it and all of that. Okay. Now they received the cecal puncture on the 15th day. They induced polymicrobial sepsis by cecal ligation puncture. Okay. They describe how they did that. Okay, so they describe all of that, and but they don't actually um, tell why they did it. Okay, so they have not justified the model. They have said that they have done it, and we submitted sham mice to the same procedures described above, but the cecum was not ligated. Okay, so they have the sham mice. The other thing, let's see if they have described in the initial parts. Okay, they describe about omega 9, they describe about um, treatment of sepsis. Um, okay, uh, so their purpose is what happens when you induce sepsis if in people who are taking omega. Okay, uh, okay, they give a lot of background. They don't clearly say, do you take oleic acid as a prophylactic? Okay. So essentially, they are saying if you take omega 9, then I mean, you have to take it continuously for some time, and then that means your reaction to sepsis will be different, and the outcomes would be different with increasing survival of septic mice. So, um, okay, but why? How did they know that people had the mice had sepsis? Okay, so they did that, and then they did a peritoneal lavage. Okay, after in 24 hours they euthanized the animal and did a peritoneal lavage, and they looked at the total leukocytes in blood samples from a tail vein, and they looked at leukocyte counts. Then they did some cytokine analysis, and they did uh, deduction of okay, all of that, some cortisol levels, and okay, they provide a lot of information on what they did, but they don't have anything that justifies whether why they did it. So here uh, we don't know different methods. um, why did they use CLP, ligation and puncture? They don't know. So I so there is, I mean, the possibilities are no information or no or probably no. um, we don't know that. Okay, so at present we don't know that this is the case, so I would classify it as no information. So remember, we are not expected to search. If you want to use this tool, you are not expected to search for information from other sources. You are expecting the authors to provide the information, so you would put no information for that. Next is, did the author sufficiently identify and characterize the model? Definitely, they did the CLP, but let's look at it. Um, for example, the animal has sepsis in a model of cecal ligation and puncture, or that the disease is present in animal. How did they test it? They don't seem to have tested it. So, so they looked at intravital microscopy of brain microcirculation. They did cremaster muscle cortisone levels, Western blot analysis, cytokine analysis, peritoneal lavage. Okay, and they do stain and find out that yes, there was bacteria in this. I can't see that they have done it. So how do you know that this particular animal had sepsis at all in the first place? Okay, so um, so bottom line is we don't know. So here, if it was not clear, okay, so again we are saying it's no information because they haven't said that they did not perform any studies to characterize the model. So we would go for no information. Next is, where the method and timing of the intervention in the specific model relevant to humans. Now, timing and route of administration in the animal model. Now, we would expect oleic acid to be given orally in humans. Okay. Uh, so OLH solution by water. Okay, by adding it to water. So they are giving it orally. So it's definitely the right route. But how do you know that it's the right dose and the timing? Uh, okay, so let's look at it. So they haven't justified why they gave that amount of uh, omega acid. So they haven't justified why they gave that amount of omega acid. Okay, so it was correct route, but nothing more. They haven't justified uh, why did they give 0.28 milligram. Is that the dose that's equivalent in humans? Don't know. So that's where we are. Method and timing of the intervention in the specific model relevant to humans. If the dose was relevant in humans, we don't know that. No information. If the authors did not provide a rationale for choosing the dose, timing, or route, yes, that's where we are. They don't mention that it's given differently in humans. So I would say no information again. Okay. The next is if the study used a surrogate outcome, did they actually use a surrogate outcome or not? First thing is they did, because they were talking about sepsis survival after sepsis, this omega 9 protecting against, I mean, improving survival on septic mice, but they euthanized it. So they did not measure survival. That's for a start. And they've done lots of analysis, cytokine analysis. They've done cytokine analysis, Western blot analysis. They've done lots of analysis. Okay, cortisone levels. Okay, so they've done that. They've done intravital microscopy. Okay, so and just reading, scanning through this, they don't say why, how it relates to survival, which is the outcome that actually they have used. Okay, so I'm just scanning through this, reading very quickly. I can't see how they related this to survival. Okay, so it's definitely not not we don't classify it as not applicable because the surrogate outcome was used, um, and they didn't provide that there was a relationship and it was high. Here, classify this as no information if the authors used a surrogate outcome but did not provide a rationale for choosing the surrogate outcome. That's what we are going to do. We are going to select. Classify this as no or probably no if the authors reported the relationship between the surrogate outcome and okay. They didn't report anything. Okay, no information then. Okay. Um, so next question, of course, we know that the study used surrogate outcome. And while answering this question, we have looked at what the authors have done, and we know that there is no information. Let's just make sure. But do not provide a rationale. Yes, that's what we are selecting here as well. Now, did a systematic review with or without meta-analysis demonstrate that the effect of an intervention or similar intervention on a preclinical model was similar to humans? Of course, they don't provide any rationale as to why they chose the model. We have scanned through the article and we didn't find any information why they used cecal ligation and puncture and whether there were previous systematic reviews, etc. So classify this as the provide evidence from systematic reviews and so on. Classify this as no information if the study authors do not mention any systematic reviews related to the topic. Okay, so that's where we are. That's what we should select. Classify this question as no or probably no if the study authors provide evidence. No, and that evidence is actually showing opposite. No, we don't have any information. Okay, so that's what we have done. So once all the questions are actually completed, the classification will actually be completed automatically. Now if you want to manually override this, you can complete this. Now I've been just using this form. You might actually want to complete this again, uh, but then what do we complete? Because there is no information, there is nothing to complete there. If we actually say low or high, then there is something to complete, but there is nothing to complete here, so you can leave it blank. Okay, next is this: did the authors describe sample size calculations? Let's have a look. Here is where the statistical section is. Okay, so they mention about using one-way ANOVA, and then p-value of less than 0.05 are considered significant. Yeah, so presented as mean plus standard error or individual values with median. Okay, so there are no sample size calculations. Okay. So in here, what we say is no information if the authors have not described the sample size calculation to justify the number of animals. Okay. Did the authors plan and perform statistical tests taking the type of data, the distribution of data, and the number of groups into account? Now, this you'll have to read a full statistical, textbook to understand this. But they have used one way ANOVA, but sometimes they have presented mean, and other times they have presented median. Now that means they have taken the parametric and non-parametric things into account, and that's probably why they have done that. So type of data, yes, and the number of groups into account. Now they have done an ANOVA. They have done an ANOVA which is comparing multiple groups. So probably that's okay, because if they were using a t-test, then that would be comparing only two groups. But here they are using an ANOVA, so that's appropriate. So here for the first time, I would say yes. And here I'm going to write no, probably yes, because the authors did not clearly say that they used median when the distribution was parametric or non-parametric. So here I'm going to say authors sometimes report mean and other times median, probably indicating that they used they were guided by the type and distribution of data. Okay. Now if you're not sure, then just put it as no information. Okay, so so unless you are very sure that the authors have used wrong statistical tests, use just put no information if you're not sure. So did the authors make adjustment for multiple hypothesis testing? Okay, so if they have used multiple groups, then usually the software adjusts this. But if they have used multiple outcomes, and remember they have used multiple outcomes, but they didn't actually say which is the primary outcome and which is the secondary outcome and so on. So they have used multiple outcomes. They have used essentially a p-value of not less than 0.05. So they have, it looks like they have not adjusted. So let's look at this. If the authors made statistical plans to account for multiple testing and avoided this, no, that's not there. No information. Okay, whether they made statistical plans, so I think that could be possible. Now here they we don't think that they actually did data dredging, p-value fiddling, or p-hacking. Okay, back to my favorite classification, no information. Okay, if a dose response analysis was conducted, did the authors describe the results? Now here they performed only one dose, so omega plus omega 9, and they only did this one dose. So there is no dose response relationship. So in that case, I'm going to say not applicable. Okay. Now, did the authors assess and report accuracy? Okay. So here they have lots of outcomes where they have done manually. So cytokine analysis. Okay, so they did it by the author's manufacturer's instructions. They don't report the accuracy there, and they don't report the accuracy for any of the any of the outcomes. Okay, so I'm going to say no information. Okay, now did the authors assess and report precision? So here we are talking about repeated samples, repeated tests in the same sample. So they don't seem to have done that. So here, just go through this section. We got the liver tissues, mixed it with the thing, yeah, and looks like they just did it once, but we don't know that for sure. Okay, so then, okay, and how was Sintra? How many did they do? Okay, I cannot see them repeating the test in the same sample, or for that matter looking at different samples to assess the sampling variability. So I let's look at here. Okay, they do mention about here analysis of leukocyte were carried out by analyzing four randomly selected vanilla segments in each. Okay, so they just done it in four segments. So what we don't know is whether they actually did it. Okay, whether we did a repeated tests on the same sample. Um, did the authors assess and report sampling error? Here, we know for some samples, they for or most samples they didn't look at multiple. I mean, this is just from a single sample, multiple areas, if you want. Whether that's sampling error, yes, you can consider as sampling error. So from different parts, yes, they did. For just one. Um, okay, so there is. So if you want this, you can say, yeah. So what do you say here? Because in for most of the outcomes, it's no information, and for one outcome, it's yes or probably yes. I would go with no information because that was the case with most outcomes, and then note here that for one outcome, they analyzed four random areas. Now, if you're faced with this situation, I would recommend that you fill in these details for the primary outcome based on which the conclusion was made. Um, the other thing is here we don't know which is the primary outcome, which is the secondary outcome. We just know there are multiple outcomes. Here, most of the outcomes had no information, so I've gone with what most of the outcomes um, tell me. If let's say if three out of four they said that there was some form of sampling error measurements assessments, then that would be different. Okay, so classify this as not applicable if it was not clear whether measurement errors were assessed. So if we had no information from the previous three questions, then we would actually put it as not applicable, which is not an option here. I will add the option, and we would classify it as not applicable for the time being, I'm just going to select no information. So um, so the actual details are filled. Okay, so when you do it, it would be corrected. I would have corrected this. Okay, so you would classify it as not applicable. Entering no information makes no difference for this particular domain, but sometimes it might. Not no information or not applicable might make a difference. Okay, so I'm sorry about that, but in the full form, final form, that would have been corrected. So next is, did the authors minimize the risks of bias such as selection bias, confounding bias, etc.? Now here, the authors selected some animals for sham and some animals for treatment. Some animals underwent cecal ligation and puncture. Others did not. They didn't actually tell how the selection was made. So we can't really look at. I mean, we don't know about selection bias. We don't know about confounding bias. We don't know whether the um, treatments that the two groups received are different. We don't know whether there was difference in the way the outcomes were measured. Uh, we don't. We certainly don't know if any subjects were excluded. And we don't know whether the study authors selectively reported the results that favor, because we don't know. They have not given us reference to the protocol or anything at all, so we don't know. Okay, so guess what I'm going to do here? No information. Okay, and the next one is where the results reproduced with alternative preclinical models. Now here, um, um, it's okay if somebody else has done it as well. So let's see if they have reproduced the results of someone else. So that's usually in the discussion. So here they are talking about mortality. Okay, all the mortality therapies. Okay, food intake. Okay, so this diet has been linked. Omega 9. Okay, omega 9. Okay, they talk about omega 9. We have previously shown that omega 9 prevents organ dysfunction and increases survival during sepsis. So they have shown it, but again, in which model they don't say that. Okay, so we cannot say that's in mice. We cannot say it was the similar group of mice, like male mice and so on. We can't say that. Um, so we don't know that. Some reports associated. Okay, so um, okay, so here um, they are theorizing it. Okay, and their neutrophils are the highest. Okay, reservoir organs. Okay, 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 okay. Uh, okay, they don't seem to have any done any reproducibility test. So, if it's not clear whether the research performed were definite, and it was not clear if the results were consistent across different preclinical models, we don't know. Okay, authors have not provided that information. Okay, so now next is where the results consistent across a range of clinically relevant variations in the model. For the first time, we are going to call it probably no. Why? Because they have only used male mice. Okay, and of a certain weight. Okay, that's very very specific. And here you see they have used adult male Swiss mice weighing between 18 and 20 grams. Okay, so now we classify this as no, um, only male mice were used. Okay. Um, did the authors report taking existing evidence into account when choosing comparators? It's not clear how they chose no treatment as comparators. Um, you can say that there was no, I mean, people don't take oleic acid routinely. Here we are talking about prevention of death if people were taking omega 9 for a long time. So um, people might be taking other things. So we don't know. So classify this as no information if the rationale for choosing the control or dose or route of control was not reported. So we don't know. Okay. Next is, did the authors describe the experimental protocols sufficiently to allow their reproduction? Um, Honestly, I don't know. I've read through this. As you can see from the recording, I have gone through this. I don't think just this enough information is sufficient to reproduce the results. But um, because I'm not qualified to, I'm not an expert in this. Um, if you ask me, is the experimental protocol sufficient using outcomes, clinical outcomes, then you can tell that. But here they have used different protocols, and that doesn't seem to be sufficient. That doesn't seem to be sufficient information. So, I mean, let's just check the supplementary files that we have, whether they have done some additional. I mean, it was results mainly. Um, it was results. This is just results. Okay, so I would just go for no information. If you definitely knew that it doesn't, the protocol is not sufficient, methods are not sufficient to describe, to allow reproduction, then you should say probably no, or no, or probably no. Sometimes you can say yes or probably yes. Okay, did an independent group of researchers reproduce the experimental protocols methods? Um, Again, no information. They didn't say that somebody else actually did it. Did the authors or an independent group of authors reproduce the results? Again, there is no information on this. So the next domain is implication. Did the author's conclusions represent the study findings, taking its limitations into account? Okay, let's see if what they have concluded. Okay, so what we know is we don't know about risk of bias and all of that. So a lot of information was unclear. Um, and that includes sample size. That could be random errors, systematic errors, measurement errors, and so on. So there is all types of errors that's possible. We are not able to definitely say that there is they are present or absent. Now let's see what they are concluding. Okay, it modulated. Okay, decrease the production. Okay, that's too strong already because of the study design. Okay. Um, Therefore, look at that. So they have done one test which may be absolutely biased, but based on that, therefore, omega 9 enriched diet, particularly olive oil, as supplemental food, may be advisable in patients with infections. So here they gave this supplemental food uh, before the cecal ligation and puncture, but here they are talking about may be advisable in patients with infections. That means it's uh, the treatment is started after the infection and might sum up with other benefits of the ingestion of diets composed of unsaturated. Okay, that's clearly not correct. Okay, so I'll put as probably no. Um, the authors authors did not consider the limitations of the study before making conclusions. And certainly, they made the wrong additional research because they I mean, there is no evidence that it was reproducible or anything at all. Here, they didn't take into account any of the that it's a surrogate outcome. It just modulated the immune response. Okay, so it decreased some pro-inflammatory cytokines. It increased IL-10 production. Yes, all of that is right, but what does that mean? We don't know. Um, Okay, so that is inappropriate, and it is inappropriate here as well. Probably no, because sorry, authors have proposed. That's where it is. Study authors propose first-in-human studies despite lack of information on the reproducible. Okay, authors um, did not report the reproducibility, and here it's not just about reproducibility by them, it's about by an independent group of people. Put the reproducibility of the cells by an independent group of researchers before recommending a first in human study. Okay, so then it's did the authors or the research team obtain ethical approvals and any other regulatory approvals required? Um, yes, they report that you can copy and paste it there. Okay, so where did they? I saw this when I was looking at the method section. Okay, okay, I'll just copy that and I will paste it. And now I'll say probably yes. No, yes. Okay. Did the authors take steps to prevent unintentional changes to data? Now they don't know how we don't. I mean, they have not reported how they manage the data at all, so we don't. We'll say no information. Okay. So next is research transparency. Did the authors describe the that was in a protocol that was registered prior? If it was registered, then they did not provide a link. Okay, classify this as no information if there was no link to a registered protocol. Okay, so that's what we'll do. There is no link to a registered protocol. Okay. Um if the authors did not provide a link to a registered protocol, this is actually no. Why? Because only if you have a registered protocol will you actually be able to describe the deviations. And here, uh, um, did the authors provide? Okay, here again, um, we are going to say no if the individual participant data were not available. Okay, because the authors are saying that they'll not uh, give data if a request has been made. Okay, probably need to complete why I said no and yes and okay. So this here, there was no registered protocol. Here, um, authors indicate that all the data are available within the study, but there is no individual subject data. Okay, so that's that. So we have completed the tool, and we have concerns highlighted here. And now the overall classification is actually uncertain clinical relevance, which doesn't seem to be very clear. I will make it clear when the revised form is sent to you. I'll make sure that this is also clear. But that's what it says. So that's how you would do assessment.